Federal agents, we need to see identification now.
You're in my home. You don't have a warrant. Get out.
Do not put your hands on him. This is assault.
2 ICE agents thought they had the authority. They had an address, an anonymous tip, and a controversial memo from the Department of Homeland Security that they believed gave them unlimited power to enter any home they chose. But when Senior Agent Victor Kane and Agent Miguel Vargas pushed open the door at 142 Oak Lane at 6:45 a.m. on January 28, 2026, and stepped uninvited into the kitchen of Chief Terrence Brooks, they triggered a sequence of events that would end with both agents in federal prison, their law enforcement careers permanently destroyed, and a legal precedent that would fundamentally reshape how federal immigration enforcement operates across New Jersey. Brooks wasn't just any homeowner. He was chief of police in Montclair, a 58-year-old law enforcement veteran with 34 years of service, an FBI National Academy graduate, and a fourth-generation American whose family had built their lives in New Jersey long before these agents were born. His badge sat on the kitchen counter. His unmarked black Tahoe with municipal plates sat in the driveway. None of it mattered to the 2 men standing in his kitchen demanding papers. Dr. Alicia Brooks didn't panic. The 55-year-old pediatric oncologist picked up her iPhone, began recording in 4K resolution, and calmly narrated every constitutional violation as it unfolded in real time. Her steady voice captured the moment Agent Kane reached for her husband's arm. Her camera captured the contempt in his eyes when he said those 4 words that would later play on a loop in a federal courtroom. That's what they all say. Within 7 minutes, the FBI knew. Within 40 minutes, the New Jersey Attorney General's office knew. Within 2 hours, the governor knew. The settlement, $8.4 million, would become the largest individual ICE payout in New Jersey history. But the real cost wasn't measured in money. It was measured in prison sentences, destroyed reputations, and a lesson learned far too late. If you're watching this story unfold, and you believe documentation is the most powerful tool we have against overreach, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and tell me if stories like this one matter to you. Your engagement helps these stories reach the people who need to hear them most. Oak Lane sat in one of Montclair's established neighborhoods. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained colonials, the kind of block where families knew each other's names and children rode bikes without supervision. Chief Terrence Brooks had lived at number 142 for years, raised his family there, hosted gatherings that had become neighborhood traditions, and left for work every morning from the same driveway where his unmarked black Tahoe now sat in the January cold. Tuesday morning, 6:45 a.m., the house was warm against the freezing air outside. Dr. Alicia Brooks stood at the kitchen island in her scrubs, preparing for her shift at the hospital. Chief Brooks moved through the kitchen in his faded Montclair PD sweatshirt and gray sweatpants, coffee mug in hand, badge and credentials resting on the granite counter where he'd placed them the night before. The morning routine had become muscle memory after 3 decades of early shifts. The front door had been left unlocked, a habit from years of living in a neighborhood where trust still meant something. The agents didn't knock. They didn't announce themselves properly. They simply pushed the door open and stepped inside as if the threshold meant nothing. ICE, federal agents. 2 men in olive tactical vests bearing the ICE insignia materialized in the kitchen before either Brooks could process what was happening. Senior Agent Victor Kane moved with the confident stride of someone who'd executed this routine dozens of times without consequence. Agent Miguel Vargas followed close behind, younger, less certain in his movements, but matching his partner's posture of unquestioned authority. Chief Brooks placed his coffee mug on the counter with deliberate calm. 58 years old, 34 of them spent in law enforcement, and he'd learned long ago to control his breathing, to read body language, to measure his responses before voices could escalate. He stepped forward carefully, positioning himself between the agents and his wife, every movement calculated to project non-threatening presence. Kane's voice carried the flat, rehearsed quality of someone delivering a script he'd memorized through repetition. Anonymous tip, immigration verification. Federal authority under the new Department of Homeland Security Administrative Warrant memo. The words tumbled out with practiced ease, as if the explanation itself granted permission for what he'd already done. Chief Brooks didn't raise his voice. He stated his name with absolute clarity. Terrence Brooks, Chief of Police, Montclair Police Department. Badge number 721, 34 years of service. He gestured toward the counter where his credentials lay in plain sight: badge, identification card, department-issued wallet. Then he pointed through the kitchen window to the unmarked black Tahoe with municipal plates parked 15 feet away in his own driveway. The evidence of his identity sat within arm's reach. Undeniable, irrefutable, official. Kane barely glanced at any of it. That's what they all say. 4 words, delivered with such casual dismissiveness that they seem to erase 34 years of service, a lifetime of community protection, every credential and verification the chief had just offered. 4 words that reduced a decorated law enforcement officer to just another suspect in his own kitchen. Dr. Alicia Brooks had already moved into action. The pediatric oncologist had spent decades making split-second decisions in hospital rooms where clarity meant survival. She recognized a crisis unfolding before her husband did. Her iPhone came off the kitchen island in one smooth motion, her thumb activating the camera with the muscle memory of someone who understood exactly what this moment required. She held the phone steady at chest height, framing both agents and her husband in the shot, and began speaking for the record. Her voice carried none of the fear the agents had come to expect from people they confronted in their homes. Instead, it held the calm, precise articulation of a physician documenting symptoms for a medical chart. She identified herself by full name and professional title. She stated the date and exact time. She narrated what the camera lens was capturing. 2 federal agents who had forced entry into a private residence at 6:45 a.m. without a judicial warrant, who were now standing uninvited in the kitchen of a police chief, who were demanding immigration verification from an American citizen in his own home. Every word was chosen for legal precision. Every sentence built an unassailable record. Agent Kane stepped closer to Chief Brooks. His hand moved toward the chief's arm, not a question, not a request, but the beginning of physical control. The gesture carried the casual confidence of someone who'd grabbed people countless times without facing consequences. "You're being detained until we confirm your status." Chief Brooks didn't move. He didn't resist the approaching hand. He didn't argue or demand or threaten. He simply stood in his own kitchen, in his department sweatshirt and sweatpants, coffee growing cold on the counter, and repeated his identity a second time. His voice remained level. His hands stayed visible at his sides. 34 years of training overrode every natural instinct that told him to physically remove these men from his home. Dr. Brooks continued filming. Her camera captured the exact moment Agent Kane's fingers closed around her husband's forearm, the grip firm enough to control, light enough to claim it wasn't force. Her voice cut through the kitchen tension with surgical clarity. "Do not put your hands on him. This is assault. You are assaulting a law enforcement officer in his private residence. My department is already en route." She hadn't stopped recording when her free hand moved to the Apple Watch on her wrist. 2 taps activated the emergency signal that connected directly to Montclair PD dispatch. No conversation needed. No explanation required. The alert system told the duty sergeant everything. Chief Brooks's residence. Emergency activation. Immediate response required. Kane and Vargas exchanged a glance. For the first time since entering the house, uncertainty flickered across Vargas's face. This wasn't following the pattern they'd executed so many times before. Most people froze when ICE agents entered their homes. Most people complied immediately, too confused or frightened to challenge federal authority. Most people didn't have the presence of mind to document and narrate constitutional violations in real time. This woman was creating evidence with the methodical precision of someone who knew exactly which laws were being broken. Kane pushed forward anyway. He cited the memo again, his voice rising slightly to reassert control. The 2025 DHS administrative warrant policy gave them authority to enter and verify immigration status based on credible tips. They didn't need judicial approval. They didn't need local cooperation. They had federal jurisdiction, and that jurisdiction superseded everything else, including locked doors and the Fourth Amendment. Chief Brooks repeated his badge number. Across the street, Richard Caldwell stood at his second-floor bedroom window, phone already in hand. The 67-year-old retired accountant had lived at number 147 for 18 years, watching the neighborhood change around him with growing resentment. The Brooks family had moved in years ago, and with them had come gatherings that filled the street with cars and music and laughter. Juneteenth barbecues that lasted into the evening. Holiday parties where dozens of people crowded the backyard. Success and prominence that somehow felt like an intrusion into a space Caldwell had convinced himself belonged to people who looked like him. He'd made the anonymous call 2 days earlier. Burner phone purchased with cash in Newark, untraceable number. Just enough detail to sound credible, possible immigration violation at 142 Oak Lane, but vague enough to avoid immediate scrutiny. Now he watched his handiwork unfold through the Brooks family's kitchen window. He saw the agents, saw the confrontation, saw Chief Brooks standing with his hands visible. And he felt vindication surge through him. He raised his personal phone and began recording the scene from his elevated vantage point, documenting the exterior view without realizing he was creating the evidence that would eventually help destroy him. The first siren cut through the quiet morning at 6:49 a.m. Deputy Chief Vanessa Grant had been 3 blocks away when the emergency signal from the chief's residence hit her patrol computer. She'd activated lights and siren immediately, her mind racing through scenarios. Medical emergency, home invasion, fire. The one scenario she hadn't considered was the one now unfolding at 142 Oak Lane. Her marked cruiser pulled into the driveway behind the agent's Dodge Durango, blocking it in completely. 2 more Montclair units arrived within seconds, filling the residential street with flashing lights and the mechanical squawk of police radios. Neighbors appeared in doorways and windows, phones already raised, capturing the chaos descending on their quiet block. Deputy Chief Grant entered through the front door that still stood open from the agent's forced entry. Her hand moved instinctively toward her service weapon before her brain fully processed what she was seeing inside that kitchen. Her boss, her chief, standing in his own home in sweatpants with an ICE agent's hand gripping his arm. The words came out stripped of everything except pure command authority. "Hands off the chief, now." Kane turned, his expression shifting from confidence to rapid calculation. He saw the uniform. He saw the rank insignia. He saw the backup units filling the driveway behind her, more officers streaming toward the house. Vargas's hand dropped away from his holster immediately, both palms rising in an instinctive gesture of non-threat. Deputy Chief Grant stepped fully into the kitchen, her eyes moving between the agents and Chief Brooks, reading the scene with the speed of someone who'd worked thousands of calls over 2 decades. She saw Dr. Brooks still recording, phone steady, professional composure intact. She saw the badge on the counter. She saw her boss standing absolutely motionless, every line of his body radiating the kind of controlled restraint that came from profound discipline. She'd worked under Terrence Brooks for 9 years. She'd watched him de-escalate gang standoffs and domestic violence situations. She'd seen him talk down armed suspects and negotiate hostage crises. She'd never seen him look the way he looked now, not angry, not frightened, but utterly still in the way that meant he was calculating every possible outcome and deliberately choosing none of them. "You're in the residence of the chief of police without a warrant. You attempted to detain him inside his private home. Release him immediately, or you're both under arrest for unlawful entry and assault on a law enforcement officer." Kane started to speak, started to cite the administrative warrant memo again, but the words died in his throat when he looked past Deputy Chief Grant and saw the hallway behind her filling with personnel. 8 Montclair PD officers, 2 Essex County Sheriff's deputies, a New Jersey State Police trooper who'd been running traffic enforcement on the Parkway and recognized the chief's address when it came over the radio. The quiet suburban street had transformed into a law enforcement staging area in less than 4 minutes. Kane's hand released Chief Brooks's arm. The movement came slowly, reluctantly, his face hardening into the expression of someone who knew he'd crossed a line but couldn't yet calculate how badly. Dr. Brooks's iPhone timer read 4 minutes and 37 seconds when she finally stopped recording. The file saved automatically to iCloud storage, backed up to 3 separate servers, before the agents had even fully stepped away from her husband. The evidence was already beyond their reach. Chief Brooks spoke for the first time since Deputy Chief Grant arrived. His voice carried the same measured calm it had held throughout the confrontation, but now it contained something additional, the formal, procedural tone of a commanding officer creating an official record for investigation. "Deputy Chief Grant, these agents forced entry into my residence at approximately 6:45 a.m. without a judicial warrant. They demanded immigration verification despite my clear identification as Chief of Police. They attempted to physically detain me inside my home. My wife has documented the entire incident on video. I want both agents taken into custody immediately for unlawful entry, assault, and civil rights violations. Contact the FBI Newark Field Office and the New Jersey Attorney General's office. This goes federal." Grant nodded once, her expression locked in professional mode. "Already done, Chief. FBI is 10 minutes out." Senior Agent Victor Kane and Agent Miguel Vargas stood frozen in the kitchen they'd entered with such confidence 11 minutes earlier. Kane's hand hovered near his radio but didn't move to activate it. Vargas stared at the floor, his earlier uncertainty now transformed into visible recognition of catastrophic error. The Ring doorbell camera above the front door continued recording. Richard Caldwell's phone continued recording from across the street. Dr. Brooks's backup footage continued uploading to the cloud. And in the warm kitchen where the coffee had gone cold and the morning routine would never feel the same again, Chief Terrence Brooks picked up his badge from the counter, clipped it carefully to his Montclair PD sweatshirt, and waited for the FBI to arrive. The sun had barely cleared the horizon over New Jersey. The real reckoning hadn't even begun. The FBI arrived at 7:14 a.m. Special Agent Thomas Brennan stepped out of the black Suburban with the careful deliberation of someone who'd spent 23 years investigating civil rights violations and knew exactly what he was walking into. He'd worked joint task forces with Chief Brooks on 3 separate organized crime cases. He knew the man's reputation, his record, his character. The emergency call from the Attorney General's office hadn't surprised him. The details had. Behind him, 2 more agents emerged carrying evidence collection equipment and tablet computers already loaded with federal statutes on unlawful entry and deprivation of rights under color of law. Inside the kitchen, Agent Kane and Agent Vargas stood exactly where Deputy Chief Grant had positioned them, backs to the counter, hands visible, surrounded by local officers who transformed from backup into witnesses. Neither federal agent had spoken since Grant's arrival. Neither had been allowed to leave. Special Agent Brennan entered through the front door and took in the scene with practiced efficiency. Chief Brooks in his sweatshirt, badge now clipped to his chest. Dr. Brooks still in scrubs, iPhone now resting on the kitchen island, screen dark but recording light still faintly visible. The two ICE agents radiating the particular tension of people who'd just realized how badly they'd miscalculated. Brennan addressed the chief first, his tone carrying the formal respect of one law enforcement professional to another. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. Chief Brooks provided his account with the same measured precision he'd used throughout the confrontation. Factual, chronological, devoid of emotion. Dr. Brooks offered her phone without hesitation. The video file transferred to Brennan's secure tablet in seconds. 4 minutes and 37 seconds of pristine 4K footage showing everything from the forced entry to the physical restraint. Brennan watched it once in silence. Then he turned to Kane and Vargas. "You're both under arrest for deprivation of rights under color of law, unlawful entry, and assault on a law enforcement officer." The agents were taken into custody at 7:28 a.m. Local officers secured their service weapons, credentials, and phones. Everything became evidence. The Dodge Durango was impounded. The Ring doorbell footage was downloaded. Richard Caldwell's exterior video still being recorded from across the street would be identified and secured within the hour. By 8:15 a.m., the FBI had everything they needed to open a full civil rights investigation. The evidence collection moved with the methodical precision of federal investigators who understood they were building a case that would face intense scrutiny. Every angle documented, every timeline verified, every piece of digital evidence authenticated and preserved with chain of custody protocols that would survive any defense challenge. Dr. Brooks's iPhone recording became Exhibit A before noon. The video quality was extraordinary. The new model iPhone captured every detail in sharp relief: the agents' faces, their badge numbers, the exact moment Kane's hand closed on Chief Brooks's arm. But it was Dr. Brooks's audio narration that transformed raw footage into prosecutorial gold. Her calm voice identified every constitutional violation as it occurred. Her medical training showed in the precision of her observations, each statement building an irrefutable timeline of unlawful conduct. Federal prosecutors would later play that recording 17 times during the trial. Each viewing had the same impact. The jury heard a woman protecting her husband not with force or emotion, but with documentation and clarity. The Ring doorbell footage provided the exterior view. It showed the agents arriving, approaching the door, and entering without proper procedure. No formal announcement. No waiting for acknowledgement. Just the door being pushed open and two men in tactical vests disappearing inside. The timestamp matched Dr. Brooks's video perfectly. Richard Caldwell's recording from across the street completed the multi-angle documentation. He'd filmed for 11 minutes, capturing the arrival of Deputy Chief Grant, the parade of backup units, the transformation of quiet Oak Lane into a law enforcement staging area. He'd intended the footage to document his vindication. Instead, he'd created evidence of his own involvement. FBI technicians traced the anonymous tip within 6 hours. The burner phone had been purchased with cash at a Newark electronics store 4 days before the incident. Store security footage showed Caldwell making the purchase, his face clear on 3 different cameras. Cell tower data placed the burner phone at Caldwell's residence when the call was made to the ICE tip line. Voice analysis matched the recorded tip to Caldwell's voice patterns with 97% certainty. The investigation expanded beyond the immediate incident when FBI analysts began auditing Agent Kane's enforcement history. What they found revealed a pattern that had been hiding in plain sight for 7 years. Kane had conducted 216 residential immigration checks across affluent North Jersey suburbs during his time with ICE. The demographic breakdown was damning. 79% had targeted Black or Latino homeowners in predominantly white neighborhoods. Of those 216 checks, exactly 0 had resulted in actual immigration violations, 0 deportations, 0 enforcement actions. Just intrusions, confrontations, and complaints that had been systematically buried by supervisors who either didn't notice or didn't care. The statistical probability of such targeting being random approached 0. Internal ICE text messages recovered from Kane and Vargas's phones removed any remaining doubt about intent. The messages stretched back months, documenting a casual racism that had become so normalized the agents hadn't bothered to hide it. "Nice house on Oak Lane probably overstays. These people think money hides everything. Bet he's got fake papers good enough to fool the locals." The messages revealed not just bias, but methodology. Kane had been selecting targets based on visible affluence in white neighborhoods, expensive cars, well-maintained homes, successful Black and Latino families who'd somehow offended his sense of who belonged where. The administrative warrant memo had simply given him the legal cover to act on prejudices he'd carried for years. As the pattern of selective enforcement became undeniable, many who later watched the footage asked themselves the same question. Do you believe every citizen should start recording the moment federal agents enter their home without clear authority? If you agree that documentation is the new shield, type record in the comments below, or share this story right now so more people understand how quickly one phone can protect an entire community. The investigation continued to expand. FBI agents interviewed 17 families who'd filed complaints about Kane over the previous 7 years. The stories followed identical patterns: early morning arrivals, demands for immigration verification despite clear citizenship evidence, dismissive attitudes when credentials were presented, physical intimidation, and always the same demographic profile: successful minority families in affluent suburban neighborhoods. None of the complaints had resulted in disciplinary action. Supervisors had classified them as misunderstandings or justified enforcement. The pattern had been invisible to everyone who wasn't looking for it, and no one in ICE leadership had looked. Dr. Brooks's video changed that calculation permanently. Federal prosecutors played the recording for agents across the Newark field office. They played it for the Attorney General's Civil Rights Division. They played it for ICE leadership in Washington. Every viewing had the same impact: the calm, professional narration, the visible evidence. The moment an American police chief stood motionless in his own kitchen while a federal agent dismissed his credentials with casual contempt. That's what they all say. 4 words that destroyed any claim of good faith enforcement. Chief Brooks returned to work at 9:30 a.m. the same morning. He'd showered, changed into his uniform, and driven to headquarters in the same unmarked Tahoe that had sat in his driveway as evidence of his identity. His command staff was waiting in the briefing room, along with 42 officers who'd heard what happened and arrived early to show support. The chief addressed them for 18 minutes. He didn't speak about anger or injustice. He spoke about procedure, verification, and constitutional limits. He used what had happened in his kitchen as an immediate teaching moment about the difference between authority and power, between enforcement and overreach, between following orders and following the law. He reminded them that every interaction they had with citizens was either building trust or destroying it, that credentials and identification deserve respect regardless of who presented them, that the Fourth Amendment applied in every home, regardless of who lived there or what tips had been called in about them. His officers listened in absolute silence. 6 weeks later, a federal grand jury convened in Newark. The evidence file presented by prosecutors ran to 473 pages thicker than most civil rights cases in the district. Dr. Brooks's video formed the centerpiece, but the file contains so much more: the text messages, the statistical analysis of Kane's targeting pattern, the buried complaints, Richard Caldwell's confession, the burner phone records, Agent Vargas's cooperation statement. The grand jury returned indictments on all charges in less than 3 hours: deprivation of rights under color of law, unlawful entry, assault on a law enforcement officer. The federal machinery of justice had been activated, and it moved with the inexorable weight of documented evidence that could not be ignored, explained away, or buried under bureaucratic procedure. Some cases turned on legal technicalities or witness credibility. This one turned on 4 minutes and 37 seconds of video that showed exactly what had happened in that kitchen and left no room for interpretation. The trial date was set for 4 months later. The federal courtroom in Newark filled 2 hours before the trial began. Local media occupied the first 3 rows of the gallery. National outlets sent correspondents. Civil rights organizations sent observers. Law enforcement representatives from 6 states attended to witness how federal overreach would be adjudicated when the victim was one of their own. The prosecution entered first, carrying document boxes and tablet computers loaded with evidence that had been reviewed, authenticated, and organized into a presentation that would leave the jury with no room for reasonable doubt. The defense followed 2 attorneys representing Agent Kane, one representing Agent Vargas, their expressions already carrying the tension of lawyers who knew they were defending the indefensible, but were bound by professional obligation to try. Chief Brooks sat in the front row of the gallery, dress uniform immaculate, beside Dr. Brooks in a navy suit. They'd been advised they might be called as witnesses. They'd been warned the video would be played repeatedly. They sat with the same composed dignity they'd maintained since that morning in their kitchen. Judge Elena Vasquez took the bench at 9 a.m. precisely. 21 years on the federal bench, former prosecutor, reputation for running efficient trials and handing down sentences that reflected both the law and the reality of harm caused. She'd reviewed the evidence in chambers. She knew what the jury was about to see. The prosecution's opening statement lasted 14 minutes. The attorney laid out the case with clinical precision: the forced entry, the dismissal of credentials, the physical restraint, the pattern of racial targeting that had preceded this incident, the text messages that revealed intent. Then she told the jury they wouldn't have to take her word for any of it. "You're going to see exactly what happened in that kitchen." Dr. Alicia Brooks documented every second. Exhibit 1 was entered into evidence at 9:37 a.m. The courtroom lights dimmed. The large screen mounted on the wall flickered to life, and for 4 minutes and 37 seconds the jury watched Dr. Brooks's iPhone footage without interruption. The quality was extraordinary, every face visible, every word audible. The jury saw the agents enter without proper procedure. They heard Chief Brooks identify himself calmly, clearly, repeatedly. They watched Agent Kane dismiss the credentials without even looking at them. They heard those 4 words that would echo through the rest of the trial. That's what they all say. They watched Kane's hand close on the chief's arm. They heard Dr. Brooks's steady narration, no panic, no hysteria, just methodical documentation of constitutional violations occurring in real time in her own home. The video ended. The courtroom remained silent for 3 full seconds. 2 jurors were visibly upset. 1 wiped tears. 3 others sat with their arms crossed, faces set in expressions of barely contained anger. The foreman stared at the defense table with the look of someone who'd already made certain fundamental judgments about character and credibility. The prosecution didn't need to say anything else. The video had made the case more effectively than any argument could. The trial continued for 6 days. The prosecution called 19 witnesses. FBI technicians testified about the burner phone, the cell tower data, the voice analysis that connected Richard Caldwell to the anonymous tip. Statistical analysts explained the demographic patterns in Kane's enforcement history numbers that revealed targeting so consistent it defied any innocent explanation. Dr. Brooks took the stand on day 3. She explained her decision to start recording, her activation of the Apple Watch emergency signal, her choice to narrate the violations as they occurred. Under cross-examination, the defense tried to suggest she'd escalated the situation by filming. She responded with the calm precision she'd maintained throughout. Recording federal agents in her own home wasn't escalation, it was documentation, and that documentation had proven to be the only thing standing between her husband and unlawful detention. Agent Vargas testified under his cooperation agreement on day 4. He pleaded guilty to lesser charges in exchange for truthful testimony about Kane's methodology. He confirmed the text messages, the targeting pattern, the supervisors who'd ignored complaints. He admitted he'd known what they were doing was wrong but had followed Kane's lead because challenging a senior agent seemed more dangerous than violating citizens' rights. His testimony was devastating in its honesty. It revealed not just 2 rogue agents, but a system that had enabled them through indifference and bureaucratic inertia. Richard Caldwell took the stand on day 5. The 67-year-old, retired accountant had tried to maintain his composure during pretrial proceedings, but cross-examination stripped away the facade within minutes. The prosecutor displayed 6 years of noise complaints Caldwell had filed, every single one targeting the Brooks family's gatherings, Juneteenth barbecues, holiday parties, birthday celebrations. The pattern was undeniable. The prosecutor then played recordings of the anonymous tip and Caldwell's own voice side by side. The voice analysis expert testified they matched with 97% certainty. Confronted with the evidence, Caldwell crumbled. He admitted making the call. He admitted using the burner phone to avoid detection. And in a moment of catastrophic honesty, he admitted why. He'd been watching the Brooks family for years, watching their success, their prominence, their comfortable place in a neighborhood he'd come to think of as his own territory. The Juneteenth parties had felt like an assertion of presence he couldn't accept. The call to ICE had been his way of reasserting control, of reminding them they didn't really belong no matter how successful they'd become. The courtroom was absolutely silent as he spoke. Even the defense attorneys looked away. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and 43 minutes. They returned with guilty verdicts on all charges for both agents. Deprivation of rights under color of law, unlawful entry, assault on a law enforcement officer. The verdicts were read in a courtroom packed with observers who traveled from across the state to witness accountability delivered through the legal system they'd been trained to trust but had learned to doubt. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. Judge Vasquez delivered her statement from the bench with the measured authority of someone who'd spent 2 decades balancing justice and mercy and knew exactly when mercy wasn't appropriate. She cited the 7-year pattern of selective enforcement, the 79% targeting rate of Black and Latino homeowners, the 0 deportations that proved enforcement had never been the real objective, the text messages that revealed contempt for the very citizens the agents had sworn to serve, the misuse of the administrative warrant memo as a weapon against the Fourth Amendment, and finally the assault on a decorated police chief in his own kitchen, captured on video for the world to see. Senior Agent Victor Kane received 4 years and 8 months in federal prison, plus a lifetime ban from law enforcement at any level. The judge noted that the ban was permanent, irrevocable, and would follow him for the rest of his life. Agent Miguel Vargas received 14 months based on his cooperation, his lesser role, and his demonstrated remorse. The judge noted that his honesty under oath had helped expose systemic failures that went beyond this single incident. Richard Caldwell received 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory bias training. The judge made clear that only his age and lack of criminal history had kept him from seeing prison time. His prejudice had weaponized federal law enforcement against innocent citizens, and that act carried consequences even when filtered through prosecutorial discretion. 3 months after sentencing, the Department of Homeland Security agreed to a civil settlement. $8.4 million, the largest single ICE payout in New Jersey history. The settlement came with no admission of liability, but everyone understood what the number represented. Accountability measured in dollars, justice priced in budgetary impact, and a message sent to every federal agent in the state about the cost of constitutional violations. Chief Brooks and Dr. Brooks held a press conference the day the settlement was finalized. They announced their decision before anyone could ask. $3.2 million to scholarship funds for Black and Latino recruits entering law enforcement. $2.1 million to a legal defense fund supporting officers targeted by federal overreach. The remaining funds distributed between the New Jersey Law Enforcement Memorial, civil rights organizations working on immigration reform, and community programs in Montclair. They kept nothing beyond attorney's fees. The chief's statement was brief. Justice wasn't about personal enrichment. It was about ensuring that what happened in their kitchen would be harder for anyone else to experience. Money could either be hoarded or deployed. They'd chosen deployment. The New Jersey legislature moved faster than anyone expected. The Brooks Accountability Package passed both houses within 8 months, mandatory judicial warrants for any federal residential entry in the state, civilian oversight boards for ICE complaints, and required body camera use by federal agents operating locally. Governor signed it into law, surrounded by law enforcement representatives who'd watched the trial and understood that Chief Brooks could have been any of them. The reforms carried teeth. Federal agents who violated the warrant requirement would face state prosecution regardless of federal immunity claims. Oversight boards had subpoena power and could refer cases directly to the Attorney General's office. Body camera footage became mandatory evidence in any contested entry. Some called it federal overreach in reverse. Others called it the Fourth Amendment being enforced at the state level when federal authorities proved unwilling to police themselves. The lawyers would argue the constitutional boundaries for years, but the practical impact was immediate. ICE residential checks in New Jersey dropped by 86% in the first year. The ones that did occur followed proper procedure because agents knew Dr. Brooks's video had changed the rules permanently. If you are ready to see institutional racism taken down, like this video and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now because you won't want to miss tomorrow's story of cops messing with the wrong people and finding out. See you in the next one.